Don't praise your children for their intelligence, praise them for their effort instead. Okay. Delivering this one of these lessons from Carol Dweck's book Mindset, because a lot of you only watched like a couple of minutes of my videos. So let me get that out there because I think it's such an important lesson. For myself, I was always raised to be like the smart person. My dad tried to inculcate this in me. But the thing is, it kind of had an opposite effect because it led to the burden of talent where now I had to keep trying to prove myself over and over again because if I didn't measure up, then I feel like I'm a failure or I'm unworthy and stuff. So you might think that as a parent, you can just instill a healthy dose of self-esteem in your child by praising their fixed abilities like intelligence, but it actually has the opposite effect. The child hears a hidden message where now if I'm not a success, I suck. That means I have to avoid hard tasks. I have to blame people. I have to make excuses for why I failed. I have to put in a low amount of efforts just to be able to say that I failed because I didn't put in the effort. At least a whole host of bad outcomes. So just wanted to get that very important message out of the way. So yeah, praise effort, good strategies, the ability to grow from setback. Praise these things instead because they lead to a different kind of mindset. So what are these mindsets? Carol Dweck mentions the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And as I list off the points for each mindset and compare them, try to think about where you fall in. Of course, you won't completely fall into one box or the other, but a lot of people, I'd say most people, have some of these components of either self, right? Anyway, so the fixed mindset is a belief that human abilities are kind of carved in stone. They can't be changed very much. And this creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over again. Because if you, let's say, fail at a test or something, then that kind of calls your whole being into question that you're not worthy, you're not intelligent after all, you're not made to be a success, stuff like this. Okay, so it's like you better not show up deficient. And the motivation to not appear deficient is going to make you shirk hard tasks, like I said. It's going to make you blame people, make excuses, so on. What other points are there? So yeah, if one test can diagnose you forever, that doesn't give you the freedom to learn because everything is on the line right now. You just have to pass the test. So you're just going to memorize and stuff, whatever. You're not actually going to try to grow as a person. Every situation calls for confirmation of your intelligence, character, whether it's relationships, career, school. So all these domains of life, you're just trying to prove yourself all the time. You think effort is for people with no ability. Yeah, like it makes you distort results, magnifying some achievements, so on, which means you actually have a lower idea of what you're capable of because you're always distorting your results all the time. Super sensitive about being wrong, making mistakes. Success means proving you're smart and talented and validating yourself as opposed to actually growing at the task. If you fail, you take it very hard and you fall into depression and let things go because there is no comeback from failure in this mindset because you think if you fail, that means you suck. You don't have the intelligence, you don't have the ability, so you're not going to keep trying to get better, right? So that means your confidence is very shaky. It can be flattened at the smallest thing. Yeah, and in success, it's not that just that they feel good, but they feel superior and better than others. They feel entitled. But behind the self-esteem is an opposite meaning because if you're somebody when you're successful, then who are you when you're unsuccessful? That means you're a nobody, right? Okay, so we pretty much covered the fixed mindset. Let's move into the growth mindset. Growth mindset is, of course, the opposite. It's an ability that intelligence can be cultivated, abilities can be improved, and it takes years of passion, work, training, so on, to see what you're actually capable of. Your true potential is unknown to yourself and unknowable to yourself. You have to put in the work and you will get better, but it's always an unknown, right? It's not like any test is going to be able to tell you definitively what you're capable of. So if you can always grow, that means that even when you experience failure, there are still many roads open to success because you can always get better. Okay, you don't have to hide your deficiencies. You can just try and improve them. Failure doesn't define you. And as for what makes you smart or talented, it's the effort. Even the geniuses and whatever, they still had to put in their effort. They had to be passionate about their thing, and that's what led them to become successful. Okay, and they think for a growth mindset person, they don't use that excuse of I didn't try because that is one of the most heartbreaking things for them. It's like, why say I could have been good at something and not try, right? That is the real heartbreak. It's not the trying and failing. It's just that you didn't try in the first place. There's a big difference between the two mindsets. Okay, So let's move on to this praise thing that I talked about earlier. The reason the praise leads to fixed mindset is because if success means intelligence, then a challenging task means you're not smart or you're deficient, right? So so that's kind of the hidden message that a child might receive when you praise their intelligence or their achievement on a task. It's like, okay, maybe I did well at this task, but what about if I failed the task? What does that mean about me, right? That's the hidden message there. And then that burden of talent kills your enjoyment, like I talked about earlier. So telling children they're smart makes them feel dumber and act dumber, uh, but it makes them claim they're smarter. This was taken from one of the studies she mentions, where the children actually lie about the results when primed with a fixed mindset. The reason I say they not only feel dumber, but they act dumber is because then they don't use the good learning strategies, they avoid the hard tasks, whatever. So if you tell a kid you're really smart, they're actually going to act dumber. Anyways, so let's move on to the other side. That was praising stuff like success, praising stuff like intelligence, fixed abilities in the good way. Of course, it's a bad way, but now let's take the opposite where you deprecate somebody's abilities, the negative side. One example of that is invoking stereotypes. Like if you evoke the stereotype of women being bad at math, let's say, it's going to affect their performance on a task. We've seen this in countless studies. However, this effect is mediated by the growth and fixed mindset. Like for a fixed mindset, let's say person, you say that this professor is really racist or something, they're not going to learn from that professor very well. Whereas a growth mindset person will still make use of those opportunities to grow, regardless of what stupidity the professor is presenting themselves with, right? So the growth mindset is a lot more resilient in the face of these negative labels and stuff. Of course, not saying that stereotypes are good, right? The stereotype threats can flatten people's performances. Anyways, so what are some domains of life where this plays out, where these mindsets come into play? One is sports, of course, right? And I talked about the burden of talent. People who are like prodigies really early on doesn't mean they're going to do very well later on, because they're not very resilient and they always think they have to prove themselves. They're not going to grow, so on. So it can actually have the opposite effect. Thinking you're smart at an early age doesn't make you very resilient, right? Whereas a growth mindset person is what it takes to become a champ, because a champion can perform no matter how they're feeling, no matter what odds they're up against. Under pressure, they perform like 3 times harder, right? That's the growth mindset. So worrying about being a nobody is not the mindset that sustains champions. Greatness doesn't come from the fixed mindset of the nobody somebody syndrome. And a lot of the people who are the best at sports, they didn't start out so hot, performing so well. They had to grow into it. She spends a whole chapter on, or a lot of the book on this, on the topic of sports. I'm not going to go into this so much. Those are kind of the key takeaways, I thought. Then she also goes into business as another domain of life, and she spends a lot of time examining some leaders in the business world. But the main thing is fixed mindset leaders, and I think one of the examples was Lee Iacocca. They're more about entitlement, self-entitlement, self-aggrandizement. They're just trying to prove themselves to everybody. They're putting everybody else down, and they kind of take their company down with them because they're just more about proving themselves. Whereas a growth mindset leader takes everybody up with them. They're trying to grow. They're not trying to just prove themselves and validate themselves, right? And what happens is, even when the workers are being humiliated by the leader, or they're having to try and so when the leader is putting their workers down, it actually turns everybody into a fixed mindset, because now they're worrying more about the judgment from the leader rather than the reality of how well their business is doing or how well their work is done. They're just trying to, so that whole environment of judgment is not very conducive to good effort. Okay. Another domain is relationships. A couple of very good points here. She mentioned some really bad beliefs that spoil relationships to do with the fixed mindset. So one is, people think if you have to work at it, it wasn't meant to be. This is one of the most pernicious beliefs that damages relationships. For example, couples think they should be able to read each other's minds. Partners should know exactly what the other person thinks, feels, needs, and vice versa. So this kind of mind reading instead of communication inevitably backfires. It takes hard work to sustain a relationship. You need to be able to communicate. They think that anytime there's a minor discrepancy, the partners disagree on something, that the relationship is gonna end or something. but actually these are just small things you can work around. They're not definitive of their relationship, right? Um, okay, the second belief is that problems are a sign of deep-seated flaws. So this happens when partners are so quick to judge each other, to disparage each other, and they think the other partner cannot improve. And the thing is that there are no perfect candidates in a relationship. Both sides are going to have their flaws, and you have to kind of just work with them, right? So yeah, so and then in fixed mindset relationships, the blame comes fast and furious. You're so quick to start assigning blame to traits in your partner, and you start to feel anger and disgust towards them, rather than things that can be improved with communication. Okay, so that's relationships. Let's move into the area of parenting teaching, which is a very important part of the book. I thought this is where every message has a hidden message for the child, and you have to recognize these. So let me give you some examples from the book. She gives, let's say the parent says, "You learned that so quickly. You're smart." Well, okay, you think you're delivering self-esteem to the child, but you have to think, what is the hidden message there? The hidden message is, well, then if I don't learn something quickly, then I'm not smart. Okay, which is like the enemy of difficult learning, because in difficult learning, it takes time to get it. You might fail, whatever. Whereas the child is now thinking, shit, now I have to learn things very quickly, and otherwise I'm not smart, right? So they're going to avoid the difficult tasks. So that's the hidden message behind it. You learned that so quickly, you're so smart, okay? Another one is, let's say you say, look at that drawing, Mart. Is he the next Picasso or what? Well, then the kid's going to think, okay, well, then I shouldn't try drawing anything hard, or they'll see that I'm no Picasso, right? They took the opposite of that. Another one is, you're so brilliant, you got an A without even studying. It's the same problem I mentioned earlier. The kid's going to think, okay, well, I better quit studying, or they won't think I'm brilliant. I better not try very hard. I must make it look like I did it effortlessly without studying. That's the hidden message there, right? So the best thing that parents can do is to teach their children to love challenges, to be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort, seek new strategies, and keep learning. That way the children don't become slaves of praise. And studies show that praising intelligence harms kids' performance and motivation because, like I said, if success means that they're smart, then failure means they're dumb. So they'll avoid the difficult challenges and treat them with contempt even. They'll start doubting themselves as soon as anything is hard or even goes wrong. And the thing is, while you don't want to praise them for these fixed abilities like intelligence and stuff, you can still appreciate their growth mindset process, their growth-oriented processes. So, for example, when they accomplish anything through practice, they study, they persist, they use good strategies, they ask for help, they take feedback very well, they handle criticism well. When the child does these good things that are related to the process of growing, praise those instead, because that's what going to make the kid love learning and growing in the future, right? Another place where this fixed mindset comes into play is when you talk about others, like when you talk about great people around the child, and you just say these guys are geniuses, these guys are super talented, they're just born that way, whatever. Think about what kind of message that gives to the child. Also, when you praise other people, like other children or whatever, in front of your kid, same thing. What is the hidden message you're giving them, right? If you just praise a child like they're talented, then the kid's going to think, okay, well, you either have it or you don't. It's not something you can grow and cultivate. When it comes to, let's say, your child having to do a test, don't say you're smart, you've got this, because now you just raise the stakes even higher. Okay. Instead, say something like, "Well, we know you've learned your stuff. We're not evaluating you, but we're proud you stuck to it and kept learning." This takes the pressure off the kid that they have to succeed, otherwise they're nobodies, right? It's an extra level of pressure where they get all these distracting thoughts that are not conducive to the task. Another thing is, if your child fails, don't blame it on the coaches and stuff. Just be frank with the child. Like, if you really wanted this, if you really want to win, well, I guess you're going to have to put in more work, or you're going to have to do better next time, use better strategies. Don't blame the coaches and stuff. This was something my dad used to do. If I got a bad report card, he would go to the teachers and start harassing them, start arguing with them, and it just sent completely the wrong message to me, right? It's like he was trying to get me off the hook for not doing the schoolwork. I wasn't doing any homework. This low effort syndrome was already part of me back then when I was a kid. And instead of being honest with me, like, hey, you're going to have to put in more effort if you really want this, he would go to the teachers and start blaming them and stuff. Okay, so sometimes parents just don't get it. And I'm really glad wisdom like this book exists out there so that parents can learn from this stuff, right? So I think if you're going to be a parent or a teacher or whatever, please read this book because you might actually save lives, you know? Okay, and a lot of people, they think that the takeaway from this is to not pressure the children or to set very low standards for them. But that is not the answer here. If you just set low standards for the children, they're going to actually become entitled and they're not going to be educated. It turns out that children can actually handle a heck of a lot more than we think. So, and she gives some examples of classrooms who've taken learning to the next level, and that at a very early age, kids are learning a whole lot that you wouldn't think possible. The key is to have high standards, but to have those high standards for all the students and to create a nurturing environment where there's no judgment, right? So a lot of times in classrooms, what happens is what we call the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like the teacher will think, okay, this kid is meant to be really smart. This is like a real study done on this too. They would tell the teachers like these kids perform really well on this test or something, and then for the rest of the school year, the teacher gives extra attention and stuff to these kids so they grow more than the other children, of course. But if you're a good teacher, you give that consideration to all the students and help them all grow, not just the select few that you think are meant for more, okay? And of course, with these high standards, you don't just put the onus on the kid to grow and learn new strategies. It's on you. The onus is on you as a teacher or as a parent to help the child grow and improve, okay? So set high standards, but also create nurturing environments that you help the children get there, and you do it in a place without judgment, a non-judgmental place. It's an accepting place, okay? One last thing here. If you groom your children for a particular task, like let's say you have to get into Harvard or something, again, you're invoking the fixed mindset where now the kid feels judged and thinks that they'll only receive the love on your terms. Like if they get into Harvard, that's the only time you're going to cherish them, right? Leads to a fixed mindset. Okay, so those are things about parenting, teaching stuff. So how do we go about getting this growth mindset? How do we change our mindset? Well, she offers 4 steps. The first step is to embrace that you have a fixed mindset. And I hope that as I was going through this video, you could ask yourself, like, which bucket do I fall into? That's the first step, right? Even just knowing this can change your behavior, as I found myself doing. The next thing is to recognize, step number 2, is to recognize the triggers that lead to this fixed mindset. It can be whenever you hit upon a challenge, you start struggling with something, or you hit dead ends. The fixed mindset might tell you to just give up and try something easier. It might be when you fail decisively at a task. It's maybe when you start judging other people, or you encounter someone who's better than you in an area that you take pride in. So these can all be triggers for the fixed mindset. You have to recognize them. Number 3 is you give your fixed mindset a name, she says. This way you can talk to your mindset, and it kind of loosens the hold that mindset has on you. So give it a name, like call it Tom or whatever, I don't know. And number 4 is you let that fixed mindset do its thing, but you just take it along for the ride. And I like this because it's like, let's say you're on a difficult task and your fixed mindset is telling you just give it up and try something easier. You're not meant for this. Well, then you call it by name and you say, hey buddy, I know you're trying to protect me or whatever, but hey, but I'm going to try this anyways. Just bear with me, right? So that way you still pursue the growth and you just take the fixed mindset along for the ride, okay? You have to recognize that the fixed mindset did develop to protect you after all. An example of this is they think when parents are very judgmental and that kids feel anxious about the love from the parent or the acceptance from the parent, they create these alternate selves in their minds of people they could be to impress their parent or to get love from them. And that's where the fixed mindset comes in, right? It's actually a protective thing. It had its function when you were a child. It's just that it's a very limiting way of protecting you, where now as an adult, you probably want to break out of these limiting ways of behavior, okay? Now, CBT, for example, tries to change the extreme beliefs themselves. For example, it'll cure you of saying, I'm a loser. That's a very extreme belief, but it doesn't address the underlying mindset which gives to these beliefs. So, and what this mindset is it's like a running account of what's happening to you, what it means, and what you should do in response to these things. It's kind of an accounting process, right? Except that the fixed mindset, this inner monologue that is focused on judging everything, and studies show that Fixed mindset people put very strong evaluations on everything that happens to them, every piece of information that comes their way. Everything is labeled as like a very good thing or a bad thing. Whereas for a growth mindset, they also monitor stuff. They also have this mindset accounting for everything, but it's not about judging everything. It's more attuned to the implications for learning and constructive action. So when something happens to you, you think, okay, what can I learn from this and how can I improve? It's not just immediately judging stuff like, okay, if I failed at this, then that means I'm a loser, or I'm not meant to be doing this, or this person is a loser. That's a very judgmental way to look at things. Okay, am I missing anything here? Okay, even when you've changed the mindset, it's important to know that this is a journey. It's not going to cure overnight. And so every day you have to think about like, what are the opportunities for growth? And this is kind of, I mentioned this before, the trans-theoretical model, where the last stage is maintenance. It's the same thing. It's like a lot of people, when they grow, they think they stop doing the things that got them to that good stage, whereas you have to keep them up. So this growth mindset, you have to keep challenging yourself. Okay. So I think I covered pretty much everything. Maybe I missed a few things, whatever. Just a takeaway is this point with the children, I think, is very, very important. Now, the reason I'm harping on this is because I fell victim to this myself as a kid. And I can see in myself how I've avoided everything. It led to perfectionism, low effort syndrome. Like it's really messed with my life. So I'm hoping that if you're going to be a teacher or parent, please read this book and you'll actually be able to foster children who grow up to be very resilient, growth-oriented, with a healthy, strong dose of confidence. And that doesn't come by just praising your children for fixed abilities like intelligence or looks or whatever. It actually has the opposite effect. Remember those hidden messages that the kids get. For example, if you tell the kid you're smart or you did really well at this task, that means you're smart. What is the hidden message that the child gets? It means, okay, let's not undertake anything hard. Let's take the easy way. I have to be good at this test. And learning is not, I don't have the luxury for learning because my whole self is under threat right now if I don't perform at this task. Like it's just a very bad sort of pressure. So yeah, please read this book. Thank you.